Yes.
Ready to go. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to tonight's meeting. Particular warm welcome to our members of the general public here in our chamber. Likewise, to those people who are online. Welcome to you. Also welcome to our members of our management team, including the General Manager. Likewise, our statutory planners who we'll be hearing from later in the meeting. And again, really pleased to see the interest in Council's meeting tonight. Thank you for that. Prior to working through our agenda, the Latrobe Council would like to acknowledge the original custodians of the land on which we meet today. We pay our respects to their knowledge, culture, and continuing connection to country. I'd also like to advise all persons in attendance that it's Council policy to record Council meetings, and in accordance with Council's digital recording and streaming policy, recording this meeting will be made available to the public on Council's website within 2 days of the meeting and will remain available on the website for a minimum period of 6 months. The meeting is also being live streamed via Microsoft Teams, and the recorded live streaming will be made available to the public after the meeting on Council's website. In terms of our agenda, first item on our agenda, councillors, is item number 1, the apologies and leave of absence, where Councillor Claudia Baldock is an apology for tonight's meeting, and she's previously sought and been granted a leave of absence, so there's no need for a motion. Thank you. Second, as chairperson, I'm required to ensure councillors who have a pecuniary or conflict of interest in any item on the agenda this evening have notified the General Manager of that conflict of interest or pecuniary interest, and I'm assuming you've done so, and by the normal method. We'll make it clear for the recording that Deputy Mayor Mead has declared an interest in item 10.1, and she will be, as a result, leaving the meeting prior to discussion on that item. Next item on our agenda is 3.1, which is the confirmation of minutes from our ordinary meeting held on the 11th of September 2023. Recommendation is that the minutes of that ordinary meeting be taken as read and confirmed. Do we have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Fiddler moved and Councillor Martin second. Councillor Fiddler.
True and correct record. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martin. Thank you. Any queries or questions in relation to the accuracy of those minutes, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is carried. Next item on our agenda is item 8. That is the public participation questions on notice from the public, whereby the General Manager has advised or provided councillors with a list of questions provided to him at least 7 days before the meeting, and Council's proposed responses are listed for your consideration, councillors. Is there a mover and a second, given the recommendation is that Council, in relation to the questions on notice received from Michael Jordan, James Redgrave, endorse the response proposed and authorise their release? Mover and seconder, Councillor Wicks, thank you. And Councillor Fiddler. There is no debate or discussion, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? That motion is carried, and thank you. Item number 9 is public participation, questions without notice from the public, whereby at each ordinary council meeting, if required, at least 15 minutes will be provided at a time determined by the Mayor for public questions. During the 15 minutes provided, the Mayor will address questions on notice submitted by the public and questions without notice from any person present at the meeting other than a councillor, which relate to the activities of the council. Now, there are some guidelines and regulations around public question time without notice. Just a couple of those for your information are: a question by any member of the public and answer given are not to be debated. Likewise, comments, questions or submissions that relate to items listed in the Planning Authority agenda are not allowed. Any question or statement that contains defamatory remarks or offensive or improper language won't be allowed, nor will any questions relating to the competency of council staff and or councillors There are another 7 or 8 guidelines relating to participation in this part of the meeting. Having said that, is there anybody who would like to question council on any matter relating to council activities? Please come forward and name and the items that you wish to raise questions on, if you would please. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to congratulate the General Manager on his foresight for those asking questions at this time, not supplying their address. Well done, General Manager. My questions tonight that you've had since the weekend. Question 1. In tonight's questions on notice, the General Manager states, Council utilises the services of a strategic planner. Is that strategic planner Joe Oliver from Terra Firma?
The answer to that question is yes.
Thank you. Second question. At the Port Surrell community meeting held on the 21st of September 2023, I asked the following question. What date was the final inspection done for the bridge over the Mersey River? Council's response, Council will take this on notice and follow up. What date did Council receive the final engineering sign-off of the suspension bridge over the Mersey River, and who was the engineer that conducted this final inspection?
Thank you for the question. The response is as follows. The use of the word final in the question is unclear, but assumed to relate to construction of the bridge, as inspections will be ongoing over the life of the asset, as is standard. The bridge has reached practical completion and a further inspection will be undertaken at the end of the current maintenance period to ensure any outstanding matters or rework will be undertaken prior to the takeover of the asset by Council. The Form 55, which is a certificate of qualified persons assessable item for the bridge, was completed by Bridge Pros Consulting Civil Engineer, specialising in structural engineering in April of 2023.
Do we have a day, Mr. Mayor, in April?
No, I don't have a day. I can provide that if required. I suspect so. Happy to provide that as a follow-up email. Thank you for your questions. Is there any other member of the public gallery who would like to ask a question? Please come forward. And if you would, name and topic on which you wish to address council.
Neil McClymont, 16 Trevena Street, Horley Beach. I haven't got a question, but I've got to congratulate council on what's coming together at Camp Banksia. I had the opportunity today to take my grandson around to the play equipment. It was 100 kids all playing on every piece of that equipment, and I reckon it's looking really good.
Thank you for the feedback, Neil. Really appreciate it. Yeah, we've had some wonderful feedback. We do wish that the area out there was grass around the area. Early days yet, and we're heading into a summer where water is going to be in short supply. So getting a strike of grass out there is going to be difficult, but it's wonderful to see that asset now being utilised to the extent it is. And yeah, I've been around myself and seen families and kids. It's been terrific. So thank you for that feedback. And yeah, it's been a project long in the making, and we're certainly glad to see it come to fruition. So thank you. Right, next item on our agenda, if there are no further questions, is the council will now act as a planning authority in accordance with clause 25(1) of the Local Government Meeting Procedures and Regulations 2015. As chairperson, I advise the council will now act as a planning authority, and in that role we will consider a development application at 353 Port Surrell Road, Wesley Bar, which is item number 10.11 on our agenda. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Mead. We have Statutory Planner Andrew Newton joining us online, as Andrew is currently on leave. He's presenting this evening. Before Andrew leads us through this application, I will note for the record that the application invokes 8 separate discretionary considerations. The report is 63 pages, and there were, I believe, 232 representations, all of which councillors were required to read through and we'll now debate. There is a recommendation that the application be approved with with conditions. And I'll ask councillors, do we have a mover and a second, please? Mover and a seconder, please.
Yeah.
Councillor Metzger, thank you. And Councillor Fiedler, thank you. Councillor Metzger, are you happy to hand over to our statutory planner?
Yep. Go for it, Andrew.
So, Andrew, we're in your hands for this early part of this debate. And thank you for joining us.
He looks tired.
He does.
Are we going to get Andrew back? Just while we sort through the technical issues, just for those listening online and those here with us, this is far from a usual development application. It's quite an extensive report, quite a number of considerations, and council is obligated to consider all those representations that we received, 232 of them, so far as they reflect the planning scheme. So a lot of reading, a lot of work and a lot of consideration, and looking forward to the debate. Councillors are, as always, required to remain impartial until this point in time, where we debate the application, the pros and cons, where we consider the representations and the comments and concerns that councillors make around the table before we take a vote. Again, as always, the decision made by council is open to appeal, and that's standard part of the course in terms of development applications. We do have a second application before us tonight out at Shearwater, and Andrew is also planning on presenting on that one as well, as long as we can sort out the IT.
Is it easy?
And I'm sure it's at Andrew's end. I'm sure he's desperately trying to.
Here you go.
Here he comes, hopefully. He might upgrade his NBN access, or internet access, I should say.
Can you hear me now, Council?
Yep.
Certainly can, Andrew, thank you.
Fantastic. Apologies for that. Yeah, I'm assuming the internet has dropped out on my end, so apologies for that. So I will obviously need to speak to the agenda item. So my device completely crashed out on my end, so I'm just going to reopen the agenda now. But while I do bring that up, noting the development application for 353 Portsrail Road in Wesley Vale, it comprises a number of components. It's proposed a two-lot subdivision, with lot 1 comprising the proposed area for the greyhound harness racing facility, comprising about 27 hectares, with the balance land comprising grazing land on the western side, as well as the cropping, irrigated cropping land to the southern, more elevated part of the site. In terms of racetracks proposed, there are 2 horse harness racing tracks proposed, one for training, one for race events, one greyhound racing track within the centre of the site. There are 2 stable buildings proposed, one for training and one for the harness stabling area, a greyhound facilities building, as well as a main facilities building that's proposed. As the Mayor mentioned, there are 8 discretions that are subject to this application. And for those who, for the benefit of those who are in the public gallery who may be joining online, it's important to note that as a planning authority, so council, local government and council take on a number of roles and responsibilities. The main question that council needs to respond to in its role as a planning authority this evening is whether the proposed use or development complies with the provisions of the planning scheme. That is the main question. In terms of the discretions, there are 8 discretions that are triggered by this development. I'll go through those in summary. P1 of clause 26.3.1 is the discretionary use of land. So the land is zoned rural resource as per the interim planning scheme. I'll touch base on the planning scheme in a moment. The rural resource zone is pretty much the predominant zoned land outside of your zone areas, and agricultural and primary industry uses have priority in that zone. So to put it in layman's terms, any other use and development that's not agriculture or primary industry needs to have a very good reason why it needs to be facilitated and located on that land. Sports and recreation uses such as this one is proposed is a discretionary use of that land. And I'll touch more on that clause in a moment. Clause 26.4.2 has 3 standards, of which there are 3 discretions that this development invokes discretion. First is that the harness stripping stables request a setback variation from the acceptable 10 metres to 9.5. You'll note in the conditions that there is an amended plans condition that deals with that request for a setback variation. And that's also because the agronomist report provided a recommendation for a shelter belt around the boundaries of that site, which the shelter belt was proposed to be 10 metres wide, a vegetated shelter belt of 10 metres wide. So obviously that would then compromise the varied setback proposed for that building. P2 of 26.4.2 relates to the increase in permitted building height. So in this zone, acceptable building height is normally 10 metres. In this case, the main structure building proposes a height of 15.1 metres, and the light towers have a height of 18 metres, with 4 towers proposing a maximum height of 20 metres. P3 of that same clause relates to the visual impact of the development. There is adjacent woodland further to the west of the site, in which the light tower specifically would be higher than the predominant height of that woodland. So it is a discretionary assessment there, as well as being within 30 metres of a wetland. I'll touch more on the wetland in a moment. Clause 26.4.4 relates to subdivision of land in the rural resource zone. Basically, any subdivision in this zone is at council's discretion. Code E262 relates to airport impact management. So the proposed development impacts or penetrates within the obstacle limitation surface, which is an arbitrary height distance of either 10 or 15 metres, and that varies depending on a development's distance, location from the airport, as well as its elevation within the landscape. So obviously the structures proposed exceed 15 metres for that development. The application had correspondence from Tasports, who own and manage Devonport Airport, and they've recommended some conditions in relation to the operation of cranes during construction, and that's listed there within the recommendations. Clause E 9.5.1 relates to parking code. The application seeks a reduction to the permitted number of parking spaces from 340 to 233. You'll note that with the application, there was a traffic impact assessment that was provided with the application. Now, Tas Racing have provided figures to GHD, who provided the traffic impact assessment with this application. So based on the number of events, typical patron numbers, typical number of people attending the facilities, that gives they've got some fairly good data to ascertain the likely number of vehicle movements and the number of people that would be attending the site, to be able to ascertain what would a reasonable number of parking infrastructure would be required for that development. The final clause is E10.6.1, which relates to development within 30 metres of a wetland. Now, the northern part of the site adjacent to Mill Road is certainly at a low point. Water drains to that area on the site, and there are some wet areas. It is evident from previous aerial imagery that that land has been progressively modified and filled in over time. So areas that were undoubtedly wetlands in the past, including areas of poor drainage, have been filled or drained. There are still some low-lying wet areas, so that clause has been assessed in response to that. The Mayor did mention that there were a number of representations received, obviously through the through the report that you have before you. Those concerns have been responded to and reviewed. Not all the matters that were raised in representations are able to be considered by the Planning Authority tonight, as they would be beyond the scope of the planning scheme and of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act. Those have been addressed separately. There were also a number of representations in support of the development. Now, I don't have the PowerPoints. I can show you the PowerPoint slide I had prepared for you this evening to show at this point. But the representations in support, one of the matters that was raised in that was that the discretionary use complies with 2631 in that it is a key economic asset to the region. So that is one component of that clause, but it is not the only component. So clause 26.3.1 is a considerable clause. It has a number of matters that need to be considered and addressed. So the key wording for that clause is that a discretionary use of land must be required to locate on rural resource land for operational efficiency if a cost-benefit analysis in economic, environmental and social terms indicates significant benefits to the region. So there's some key components within that wording. Operational efficiency is one aspect that needs to be considered. And the cost-benefit analysis not only considers, okay, what are the benefits and significant benefits to the region in economic terms, but also environmental and social terms also need to be considered. So obviously, as I said, I don't have the slides to be able to show at this point to the councillors, but while I do battle on with the technology on my end, I would welcome any questions or queries at this point.
Thank you, Andrew. We'll go to the mover first, so Councillor Metzger.
Thank you, Andrew. Feels weird looking at you and you're not there. So thank you. You've done a great report, very thorough as usual, based on the information that's been provided to you. My concern, I suppose, is around the information that hasn't been provided, namely around what you just discussed around 26.3.1, the requirement for discretionary non-residential use to be located on rural resource land. As you said, the acceptable solution hasn't been met, so we look at the performance criteria. So other than for residential use, discretionary permitted use must meet 4 criteria. 3 of those 4, I agree, have been met. The 4th one, saying that it must be required to be located on rural resource land for operational efficiency, as long as it meets one of those 8 criteria. Now, 7 of the 8 are based around the use being to do with prime production, either on the site or on the adjacent land. But the last one, as you've mentioned, is if a cost-benefit analysis in economic, environmental and social terms indicates significant benefits to the region. Now, from what I've looked at, I disagree that information has been provided sufficiently for us to actually be able to do that. So if you do like a quick Google search of what a cost-benefit analysis is, it's, my first one that came up was cost-benefit analysis is a systemised approach used to assess the advantages, benefits and disadvantages or costs associated with a particular decision, project or policy. So the Tas Racing provided us with the financial contribution that the industry makes to the Tasmanian economy as a whole. Their spending, the document went into detail, well, it was pretty general as far as the region. So it outlined the spending in the 3 regions being Launceston, Hobart and then regional Tasmania, which is basically everywhere bar Launceston and Hobart. The it was then broken down into the direct, so the direct spend specific to the racetrack, which is what we are looking at, not to do with breeding or maintenance of the animals, which is the other areas that they looked at. But it's really hard to actually identify what financial benefit a racetrack in our location gives, due to the fact that that money is also lumped in with the wagering profits, which in my mind isn't really dependent on location, and it's also not specific to the location either, just because of all the online gambling platforms. So it's really hard to establish exactly how much money would be made by having a racetrack in Latrobe or even on the northwest. So as far as providing, I don't believe there's been any information on the direct and economical benefit of locating the track in our region has been provided. And there's definitely been no mention of the economical costs of this sort of facility in our region. So even if we were to do our own cost benefit analysis, it's actually impossible to do based on the information that we've been provided. And then when you look down for really like the social and the environmental benefits versus the costs, they haven't been really provided by the applicant either, as far as I can see. And as you pointed out, in that criteria, it does specify grammatically that each of the three benefits have to be analysed, not just meeting one or two, it has to be all three. So based on that, I'll be voting against the motion, and then I'll be putting, if the motion is lost, I'll be putting forward a motion to refuse the application based on those terms.
Okay, Andrew, initially, would you like to just respond if you choose to, in concerns to the concerns raised by Councillor Metzger?
Yeah, look, certainly. I mean, what Councillor Metzger mentioned earlier on in the discussion there was absolutely correct in terms of how 26.3.1 is to be assessed. There are 4 components to that performance criteria. Part C of that performance criteria, which is on page 52 for reference. I finally got the agenda report open in front of me, so I'm back. I've got the report in front of me. Basically, under Part C, there are 8 sub-points, and it needs to meet one of those. Clearly, the first 7 are not applicable or not able to be met by this proposal, which leaves sub-point 8. A cost-benefit analysis in economic, environmental and social terms indicate significant benefits to the region. So I guess it's important to note that any development, regardless of its scale or scope or what it is, will always have some level of impact. Doesn't matter whether it's residential, commercial, industrial, whatever it is, there will always be some level of impact, economic, environmental and social terms. And this is one of the very rare occurrences within the planning scheme where it actually calls in an assessment and consideration in relation to economic and social matters. Environmental is certainly considered throughout the planning scheme, but very rarely does it bring in economic matters for consideration. So certainly the matters that Councillor Metzger raised certainly look valid to be raised because it is a discretionary assessment, and this is certainly the clause, one of the clauses which it's most certainly discretionary under. But most certainly, I think with the size and scope report that was provided by Tas Racing, that was conducted by IER, I take the point that it certainly noted the regional figures rather than being able to break that down to specifically to the Northwest Coast as this region. The planning assessment that was provided with the application had some figures within that specifically for the Northwest Coast. So the applicant who's provided the application on behalf of Tas Racing, they have provided within their assessment those figures. So that was on page 53 for reference. So those figures weren't specifically mentioned in the size and scope report, but they were provided within the application documentation. And this is where I guess I was emphasising from the discussion earlier that it's not just the economic, social and environmental matters also need to be considered. Now, I guess the saying as to how far do you consider those economic impacts? How far do you consider the social impacts and the environmental impacts? And depending on the proposed use and developments, one or more of those three aspects, being economic, social, environmental, may be more applicable than another. And this is where ultimately the wording of this clause does provide council as a planning authority discretion in relation to discretionary uses on such land.
Okay.
But other than that, I don't think I have any further comments in relation to Councillor Metzger's comments that she's raised. But certainly this clause, as I was sort of alluding to, there is a lot to consider within this clause as part of this assessment.
Okay, Andrew, thanks for that. Again, it's a battle. It's difficult to ascertain the cost benefit analysis when, as racing, the applicant have provided information which is so broad. And even the information provided relative to the Northwest Coast is also inclusive of harness racing and conducted at the Burnie track, for example. So again, we're asked as a planning authority to conduct that analysis or to understand any analysis. And we can't be specific around the benefit that specific development application will have, either benefit or detriment, economically, socially and environmentally to any large extent, given the information provided by the applicant. I think that's the concern that Councillor Metzger's are raising more broadly. I might just ask Councillor Fiddler as seconder if he has any queries or questions, and then we'll throw it open to the rest of the councillors, including myself.
I'm happy with quite complex report that he put together, and I'm happy to vote for proposal.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go around the room. Councillors, anybody like to start us off? Councillor Sims.
Andrew, I know it concerns me about the road. I know that it's going to be wide Milldam Road, but to what extent or length to and after the main entrance of that complex, proposed complex?
So the traffic impact assessment recommended that the approaches to the proposed junction be widened to facilitate simple right turn treatment. So it's simply a widening of the road carriageway to facilitate two vehicles to pass heading eastwards. Should one vehicle wish to turn right, there'd be another vehicle that wants to continue straight on. So it's certainly the traffic impact assessment is not proposing nor is it considering any upgrades to significant length of Mill Road, nor the whole length of it. It's in relation to the development, the use and development that's proposed specifically. Obviously, as a road authority, council obviously needs to consider the roads generally, but certainly the traffic engineer who's provided the assessment to accompany this application has recommended some improvements to Mill Road. Council's road authority has also recommended some conditions of approval in relation to the provision of those to those works. I'm not sure whether Mr. Magor would wish to provide any further comment or correspondence in relation to that, but certainly from the planning scheme perspective, it's looking at the recommendations that have been proposed relate to the access immediately adjacent to the proposed site. Certainly no works beyond the scope of the subject site.
Thanks, Andrew. I might just refer to Manager of Development, the Manager of Infrastructure and Assets, Jonathan Magor. Anything further to add in relation to Councillor Sims's question?
Unless there's any further follow-on question, Andrew is right in terms of it's dealing with that junction itself and the turning of traffic at that location rather wholesale up or down the road.
Thank you. Queries and questions, councillors? Councillor Wicks.
Thank you. Must note it was quite a remarkable amount of representations, 283 in total, 212 supporting and 71 against the application. Many of those against list issues that we are unable to factor into our deliberations and discussions, and the planner's report addresses those issues. I'm quite content with the conditions that are put forward by the planner, and especially noting Co-Sport's conditions regarding the airport. I think it's a very exciting development. It's a great location, and I think personally it's an asset to the region. So obviously I'll be voting for.
Thank you, Councillor Wicks. Other councillors? Councillor Brown.
Yeah, pardon me. Going through and now listening to Andrew's very comprehensive report, I feel I'm with Councillor Wicks that I think it's a good asset to our community, and I don't think it's in a bad spot. I'll be voting.
Understood. Thank you. I'm happy to go next and then to Councillor Martin. So, Andrew, in relation to the traffic impact assessment that was done, earlier in your presentation, you referred to the information provided by Tas Racing to the traffic engineers who undertook the assessment. In that information, they provided figures that there will be up to 200 patrons attending any one meeting, along with other attendees. I would have thought there would have been some historical data to support that figure available from meetings conducted previously over the last decade or whatever at Devonport, for example, the showgrounds. Likewise, meetings conducted at Burnie and elsewhere in the north of the state other than the two cities. So it surprised me, and it's challenging for me to support the application, the discretion around a reduction in parking from 340 spaces down to 233, when the only information is that provided by the applicant without any supporting data. I assume could have been easily obtained from previous race meetings. Secondly, in terms of the traffic impact assessment, it concerns me that with such a large reduction in parking, that in the report provided, they suggest that the club room or the catering facility out there will be available to the general public, and that helps justify the social benefit to the community. But having said that, there's no assessment regards to the number of parking spaces required for community events held at the site. And it's problematic in that, say, a large car show or whatever could potentially require the 300 odd sites or more that would normally apply to this application. So it concerns me that there's not sufficient data provided by the applicant to justify the reduction of over 100 car parking spaces to a multi-use site. Can you add anything further to the information provided by the applicant in regards to that?
So I might start with the second question first and then work my way back to the first. So the second question really was in relation to potential for the facility to be available for use by the community outside of race meetings and such forth. So obviously, as a planning authority, we're not considering what those type of events or functions could be. They could be, for example, something very temporary or occasional in nature, which may not require any planning assessment in the first place. An example might be, for example, the Latrobe football ground. Obviously, yes, that facility has been there for some time now, but if we look at that and go, okay, I want to propose a new football ground, they would factor in the number of patrons anticipated to attend the football games, number of games, the number of players, officials, etc. Now, that football club may very well want to occasionally use their club rooms for social gatherings and events. They might have a fundraiser, they might have club functions and things like that, which may have different parking or parking demands to what the normal games on game day would would facilitate. So it would be a similar situation with this proposed development. Now, if it was proposed that the facilities were in the long term to be then used for multiple uses, for example, they might go, well, this, in terms of the food facilities, they might want to have the restaurant open for more frequent dining to members of the public, not necessarily coming to the site for races, for example. It's at that point then we would go, okay, you're now proposing an additional use. You're proposing food services, i.e. a restaurant on the site, and we need to consider the demands for that use at that point. So certainly as part of this application, there's nothing to that sort or extent proposed. It's more stating that, look, it could be made available to the general public, to the community as a facility, and if that's for something of an occasional, infrequent nature, then the planning scheme exempts those type of infrequent, occasional uses. So that would be my sort of discussion in relation to that second question for consideration. In relation to the first point, obviously the parking numbers and the data that the traffic impact assessment provided has been provided by an appropriately qualified engineer who has specialist experience from traffic management, traffic engineering perspective. Now, from my professional experience as a planner, most commercial and industrial type uses, certainly in relation to the interim planning scheme, which this application's been assessed under, the acceptable solution is normally quite conservative in its numbers. So it's not uncommon for applicants to seek a variation to the permitted number of parking spaces if they know they don't need anywhere near as many parking spaces as what the planning scheme requires them to provide. Now, whether the acceptable solution being 340 spaces is far too much or not too far off the mark, obviously that's something for a qualified traffic engineer to really delve into, but certainly the 207 or 233 spaces that are proposed, 207 of those are formalised informal parking areas, 26 are informal as an overflow parking area. So the 233 proposed, the traffic engineer has stated that would be sufficient to cater for the vast majority of traffic movements that would be anticipated to a site. And it's also noted that traffic engineers, they rarely try and aim to provide for 100% of the anticipated average traffic movements. They normally try and cater for the 80 to 90% mark. And again, your vehicle movements are obviously going to vary in the number of patrons that would be, or the number of people that would be attending the site in a vehicle. You might have carpooling occur. You might have one large vehicle with, say, only 2 people in it, and another vehicle turn up with 5 in it. You may have taxis, buses, those sort of things to consider as well. So there's always going to be a bit of average to consider with that. But as I said, we do have a traffic impact assessment. I do note as well, Mr. Mayor, where they've obviously where some of that data is that they've pulled that from, whether that was, again, I can't obviously speak for Tas Racing and what they've provided, but it's certainly what we have before us to consider as part of this application. Yeah.
And that's my point. It's not the question H&D have done the traffic impact assessment. It's more about the figures they've been provided by which to conduct that assessment. And secondly, with the car parking spaces, in a number of occasions, and it's highlighted in the report, the patrons or people attending the site will also be towing horse floats on many instances. So they'll take 2 parking spaces instead of 1 potentially. But not only that, Andrew, and I don't expect any further commentary on it, but there's no provision for any off-road parking at Mill Road. There's nowhere you can park along the road, as compared to, say, the rec ground that you mentioned, or other sporting facilities and venues like the Speedway. But but also there's no mention in the report or no reference to an overflow car park. I think there was 23 spaces mentioned at one stage on the same site, but again, when we have large events, there's usually provision made for overflow. And I guess that the NWFL Grand Final at Latrobe is an example of that, where we used either Perkins Park or the Junior Cricket Ground. And again, that the potential use of it isn't reflected in the report as such, although I take your point around that might be subject to a change of use, although the ad hoc usage isn't subject to a change of use application. But they are my concerns. I understand the commentary, I understand your assessment and what it's based on. I certainly don't wish to question GH&D's professionalism in providing the report they have. You might go to Councillor Martin next if you have any questions.
Just the quality of the road itself, with the increase of traffic, but the increase of the size of the traffic, is that road strong enough to be able to deal with the number of horse trucks that would be attending the facility each day? Is it, race meetings are, they're weekly, if that, but training is every day. So is that, is that road tough enough and ongoing with the proposal put forward that it's only going to be very limited works? Is it going to be able to stand up, the road going up through past the old pulp, or are there increases legitimately required to sustain that road for everyday users?
I'll ask the manager of infrastructure and assets, if he's in the room and has an intimate knowledge of the road construction out of Mill Road. If you would respond to that one, please.
Can do, thank you. So a number of years ago, we had quite a bit of trouble with that road when it was being used in the sort of tail end twilight years of the mill, and it was upgraded significantly to cater for high productivity, higher mass vehicles. So they're vehicles that are even heavier than and with more weight on per axle route than what is general access, which is what all these vehicles in and out of the development would be, general access vehicles.
Very good, thank you.
I could recall, Mr Mayor, General Manager, that when that work was done, there was a big debate because the mill was basically announced it was closing. Council looked to the future and did a substantial upgrade on the, I guess, the desire that at some stage in the future the pulp mill would be converted into basically an industrial site, which is happening. So, but there was quite a bit of debate at the time about the money that was spent on that. They spent, a lot of money to make sure it catered for heavy vehicles.
Okay, thank you. Any other queries or questions?
Just one.
Councillor Sims.
Andrew, I was looking at the plans, and it's a bit hard to see when you expand, you can't see properly. Is there a lift well incorporated in the development?
Sorry, Councillor Sims, I didn't fully catch all of the
Is
question.
there a lift well incorporated in the building, in the function centre?
Yes, there is a lift in the proposed plans, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. If there's no other questions, I'm going to ask Councillor Metzger if you'd like to finish the debate.
I just wanted to highlight, I suppose I wanted to draw the councillor's attention to the fact that this application will no doubt be appealed, whether we vote for or whether we vote against it. So I suppose we just have to be really confident that we can actually back that decision. So it's not the applicant that needs to prove it. Once it goes to the tribunal, it's actually us. And further to what I said before, if you read that performance criteria that I talked about in my discussion, it specifically states the cost-benefit analysis in economic, environmental and social terms indicates, not would indicate, but indicates, it should have already been done. Significant benefits, not neutral, not oh, it's not going to be worse, it's not going to be slightly better. It needs to indicate significant benefits to the region. So if you can hand on heart believe that this application does that.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Metzger. Now, we'll put the motion, and remember, the recommendation is that it be approved with conditions. All those in favour? Okay. Can you please hold your hands up clearly? That'll be 5-4. and 2 against. The motion is carried. I'll be the second person voting against. Thank you. Thank you to Andrew for the work you've done. Thank you, councillors, for your careful consideration of the issues and the application. And if you wouldn't mind, we'll ask Deputy Mayor Mead to come back into the room. Thank you. For those online, we're just waiting for Deputy Mayor Mead. Declared an interest in the previous item and left the room. Record will now note that Deputy Mayor Mead has re-entered. We are still acting as a planning authority, and in that capacity, we'll now deal with 10.2, which is a development application at 18 Club Drive, Shearwater. Do we have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Fiedler and Councillor Martin, thank you. I should state that the recommendation is for approval with conditions. Councillor Fiedler, I'm assuming you're happy to hand over to Andrew, who again I think is presenting on this application.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Andrew. Are you right to go with this one?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors. So the development at 18 Club Drive in Shearwater, it's for a proposed dwelling extension. So the existing dwelling at the site is currently a brick veneer single-storey residence that covers approximately 150 odd square metres of site coverage area. The application proposes to add another story, a second story to that existing building. The cladding on the construction of the building is to match and to replicate the existing dwelling construction, and it also proposes a hipped roof to minimise the amount of bulk and scale adjacent to the edges of the roof. So one representation, excuse me, one representation was received during the advertising process. The application is discretionary in relation to clause 10.4.2 P3, which relates to the building envelope. So the maximum height of the walls is 5.57 metres in height. Now the building envelope works as a 3-dimensional bubble that sits over each block. In simple terms, if a development is contained within that envelope, it's not deemed to cause an unreasonable impact in terms of overshadowing, overlooking, or in terms of visual bulk. So for a height of 5.57, ordinarily the minimum side setback would need to be 2.57 to fit within that building envelope. In this case, the minimum setback is just over 2 metres. So that results in just over half a metre of the building protruding beyond the permitted building envelope. Assessment of the impacts commences from page 307 in the agenda report, with shadow diagrams that were provided by the applicant on page 308. Would welcome any questions or queries at this point.
Okay, starting with the mover. And the seconder. Around the table, councillors. Councillor Brown.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of bedrooms in this place.
There is.
I'm just wondering, is it for some other use?
I should, I guess, caution councillors that we are considering the application we have before us. It is as it is. And what it's potentially used for isn't something that we consider by understand the reasoning, albeit not being able to be considered as part of this discussion tonight.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I might just provide
certainly, Andrew.
Yeah, just a little bit of commentary on it. So this application is also being assessed against the interim planning scheme. So obviously this application was received and validated, receipted before the Tasmanian planning scheme provisions came into force. So what, in simple terms, it means that this application, the council's planning officers had requested further information from the applicant prior to advertising this application and commencing the full assessment, and that did take some time to address the concerns that were raised by the planning officers in the initial assessment. I note obviously the number of bedrooms. Certainly, it's unusual to have a dwelling with that number of bedrooms, and also a dwelling to have the number of bedrooms, ratio versus the amenities to service that dwelling, i.e., kitchen, bathroom, etc. However, it's very clear that with this application that was received, it's clearly for a dwelling extension. It is for residential use. It's been stated on the application form. It's been assessed as such. So if it is used for any other use or purpose that's not a single dwelling, and that is brought to council's attention, then obviously we can act upon it accordingly. But look, certainly it is clear as to what's been proposed, and that's what's before us this evening.
Yes, and any concerns under the building code will be assessed or considered, Mrs. Phoebe, when the building permit is requested, I assume.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. Any other queries or questions around the table? If not, put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? That motion is carried. I thank you again, Andrew. Thanks very much for the time you've taken in your leave to present on both items tonight. Very much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Next item on our agenda is 10.3, that council cease to act as a planning authority. We have a mover, Councillor Wicks, thank you, and a seconder, Councillor Martin. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. And we revert to council as such. The next item on our agenda is 11.1, comes from the Development and Regulatory Services Department, and it's in relation to the naming of a new road created by a subdivision off Cotton Street, Latrobe. Report author is Troy McCarthy, who's the statutory planning officer. The recommendation, if I'm not mistaken, is that the report by the planning officer concerning naming of the new road created by a subdivision of Cotton Street, Latrobe, be received. A council resolved to name the new road off Cotton Street K. Campbell Close. Okay, a mover and a seconder, Councillor Wicks, and 2 or 3 options. I'll go to Councillor.
Councillor Metzger moved it.
Sorry?
Councillor Metzger moved it.
Oh,
Yeah, I've got my hand up first.
my apologies, Councillor Metzger, and thank you, Councillor Wicks. So we'll move it, Councillor Metzger, and second to Councillor Wicks. Councillor Metzger.
I really like it. It's got a nice ring to it. Okay, Campbell Close.
Yes.
Yeah, and the report indicates, I believe, that there was some issues with other names, but it's been problematic for council staff. I'm aware of that personally, but yes, again, thank you to Troy and the team and Jan and the rest of the team who have put together that report. Councillor Sims, I might go to Councillor Wicks, sorry, as the seconder first before you, Councillor Sims. My apologies.
It's a great name. It's for a person, a champion of our community that's now passed, and very fitting tribute, and I'm sure our family will be very happy. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Wicks. Councillor Sims. Stole your words?
So words that we're going to use because it's very fitting for a local identity that's worked very hard for this community, and like Kate Campbell. Thank you.
Very much so, thank you. Sure, those sentiments are shared around our table. Thank you, and our community, I should say. Other queries or questions? With the motion, all those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. 11.2 is the Building Department report. The recommendation is there, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is that the report advising of building and plumbing applications and notifications received for the month of September 2023 be received. Is there a mover? Councillor Sims, thank you. and Councillor Fiedler as seconder. Councillor Sims.
No, it's 29 applications. It's a bit low, but it's still steady growth in this municipality. So it just worries me that all the housing development, I think the town's becoming too small.
Too small? That's an interesting comment. Thank you. Councillor
Main Street.
Fiedler?
Nothing further.
Queries, questions around the table? Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Leads us to 11.3, which is the Planning Development Application Status Report for September. As a mover and a seconder, given the recommendation is that the status report of development applications for the month of September 2023 be received. We have a mover in Councillor Wicks, thank you, and a second in Councillor Sims. Councillor Wicks.
I've got no commentary on any items there. Thanks.
Councillor Sims.
If you look at the graph, it's increased it slightly, so good outcome.
Queries or questions? Comment from the Mayor. Pleasing to see that development applications over the last 3 months have continued to increase. So we have a trend developing, albeit short term. That's very positive for the future of our community. Having said that, if there's no other questions or queries, no, put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Next item is from the Office of the General Manager, none no less. Item number 12.1, which is the public participation and question time council meetings policy. Thank you, Councillor Wicks. Is there a seconder? Councillor Fiedler. And the recommendation is, for the record, that the report by the General Manager concerning public participation and question time council meetings policy be received and councilled. Note the policy has been amended to stipulate that if a member of the public does not wish to state their address during the public participation section of an ordinary council meeting and their questions are taken on notice, then the member of the public is to complete a contact details form before leaving the meeting, so a written response can be provided by the General Manager. And 2, adopt and amend public participation and question time council meetings policy as attached to this report with immediate effect. I did jump the gun a little bit tonight, as referred to by Mr Redgrave, not requiring those speaking to give their address, but I think that was appropriate given the discussions we've had during workshops on this matter. Any comments, mover and seconder?
I guess I can speak to it because I brought it up as an item that we should have been dealing with. It was quite archaic that we demand people provide their details, particularly to an open forum, and now more so while it's being live streamed or there for perpetuity on the internet. So I think it's a good change in the policy. It affects nothing else, and we would have their details mostly anyway if they complete the form. So.
Thanks, Councillor Wicks. The Councillor is the seconder, if I'm not mistaken. I think the General Manager.
I just wanted to put on the public record when Mr Redgrave mentioned earlier, due to my foresight, it was an issue that was raised by Councillor Wicks. Record staff wrote the report as normal, but it was Councillor Wicks that raised it.
And thank him for it. Any other queries or questions? And given that's been workshopped extensively, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? That motion is carried. Next item, 13, comes out of the Corporate and Business Services Department. It relates to the 13.1, the mobile food vending policy. The report author is Greg Fenwick from the Economic and Tourism Development team. And the recommendation, if I'm not mistaken, if I can quickly flick to it, is that the report by the Economic and Tourism Development Officer concerning mobile food vending policy be received and the amended draft mobile food vending policy and the proposed fees and charges as presented be adopted.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Sims. And a seconder, Councillor Metzger. Too slow, Deputy Mayor Mead. Thank you. Councillor Sims.
Mr Stevie, Acting Manager of Corporate Services and Business, to give us a rundown, if you like.
Yes, through the Chair. This policy has been modelled on policy that has been adopted at Kentish Council. Obviously, the locations are different. And is also based around previous conditions or guidelines that Council used whilst not having a formal policy on food bans as to the types of conditions that we would include on any approval previously given. There are a number of submissions that were made that are detailed there in the report, and council office response to those issues raised. I guess I also just wanted to point out that there is a perception that this applies or will prevent all other food vans from operating within the municipality. It's only related to food vans in public areas. Under the current planning scheme, if property zone general business, food business use on that site is a no permit required. So council does not have any control over those.
A number of those sites in our municipality being used in that way.
That's right.
Okay. Further comment? No. Sims? Second, I'd like to make a comment or query or question.
So I will first off say I was on the Economic Development Committee that first, I suppose, drafted this policy and put it forward to the council, thinking that, you know, I've considered everything, but as when you go out for public consultation, people bring up things that you otherwise wouldn't have realised, I suppose. But I suppose I just have a couple of comments to do with the feedback from the community. So one was around the Ports Royal Surf Club. If my memory serves me correctly, we took that was originally on there, wasn't it? And then we took it off because the car park is technically under the control of the surf club.
No, the car park is under the control of
council.
Oh, it is. Okay. So why don't we have a surf?
Ask the GM to comment.
Yeah, we did. They did use it at one stage. There was a little bit of controversy at the time. Council did approve it. Yeah, whether it should be on there, my understanding it wasn't very successful and they basically didn't go ahead with it. But
what, sorry?
It's the surf club at Ports Royal.
Yeah, surf club at Ports Royal. They had a van there for a season, and I think
it was actually quite successful.
All right. Well, why it's not on there now, but yeah, there was some controversy at the time.
Coffee vans and things come there, so to me, it would make sense to have the surf club car park on there because you quite often get, or then they'll just randomly have like overnight, they'll have the bar open and then they'll have a food van. They'll organise a food van to come to the surf club.
But isn't it also used for markets by the sea?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's a different.
Yes.
Yeah.
A different
So yeah,
set of circumstances.
yes, a bit that comes under events.
Yep.
But just the one-off food van, I feel like it should still be on there. But that's why I thought, I knew it came up in discussions, but then I thought you had a reason why we took it off.
So are you going to move an amendment?
Well, it hasn't gone out for public comment. That's the thing. Yeah.
The policy.
I know there was a bit controversial at one stage, but
If I'm not mistaken, the policy actually has gone out for public comment.
no, but when you had one, it wasn't on the list when it went out, Jan?
No.
Okay,
That's
point taken, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
My mistake. So for clarity, surf club wasn't listed when the policy went out.
Yeah, and that's the feedback from the surf club is that they would like
Thank
it on there.
So do we need an amendment to the motion to include?
I guess you see whether you need to go back out again or not, because it was controversial before.
Okay.
Was there from the CBD?
Well, if it's controversial there, it's controversial anywhere, is there? It's like.
Point taken, but I might ask Mrs. Phoebe if she would to comment, please.
I would suggest that could be administered still through the event process, given it's the surf club that would be required for those food vans to be there, even if it is on an ad hoc basis. There could be an event permit issued for the year for X number of situations, as opposed to just the one-off market by the sea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which would then, I guess, give the surf club some input into
some control of what
permits were being issued for that particular site.
So we have an alternative, but also we have the opportunity, if we need to review the policy based on feedback, if that alternative isn't acceptable to the surf club. So
we don't want to add red tape. We don't.
No, I understand.
Another comment was around the commercial competition. What's it called? Yeah, as far as competing with businesses, specifically out of Portsmouth, I suppose. One of the bricks and mortar businesses were concerned that it's going to be competing with them during a peak season when that's when they make their money, kind of thing, which I agree it will. There are also, as you said, benefits, especially if you get a few food trucks together, it does bring people to the area, but I think in general it probably will. It does have the potential to compete with the bricks and mortar businesses out there. So I had a bit of a look at the policies that other councils have put forward, like so Launceston and Hobart City Council. On their part of their policies that they actually have a limit to how long someone can park there for. So I think 4 or 6 hours or something like that. They also have a proviso where you can't leave it unattended, so you can't set it up, park it and then come back later in the day or the next day or whatever. And I think that will probably ease some of the concerns around the competition for business out there if we could put some hours of operation, some limits around the hours of operation in the policy itself. I know Jan said that we can, that could form part of the permit condition because they still obviously have to apply for a permit condition. But then, then we're just back to the same story that we were before. We had a policy, because then it's up to the staff, it's what they decide is appropriate and that sort of thing. Whereas I think it's in the policy, it's blanket, everyone knows where they're sitting, everyone gets treated the same.
Consistent application of the same guidelines.
Yeah.
And so if that was included, there would be that consistency. I want to ask Mrs. Phoebe if she would just comment on their suggestion before we discuss whether or not we need an amendment.
Yeah, well, if you wish, you could alter the recommendation to include that the permit conditions must stipulate to only be in place for whatever hours you choose, or be left unattended for an hour.
Yeah.
So that way it's then enshrined in that recommendation and approval.
Yeah. But then what would say someone came to council with a copy that said, right, I want to set up a jetty car park every day over summer. Who decides if that's appropriate or not?
The economic development team would review those applications and obviously refer back to
policy
council decisions that have been made in relation to that.
Yeah. Okay. I just don't want there to be a risk of some people being allowed somewhere for a long time, some people not.
So I need to be clear, are you seeking an amendment to restrict the number of hours that any one operator is able to spend in any one spot on any particular day?
Yep, that'd be good.
So to what extent are you looking to limit the time? 4 hours or 6 hours or what's?
Yeah, six hours.
Okay. So I'll take that as an amendment, and I'm sure Mrs. Phoebe will include that as such should the amendment be.
And that it can't be left unattended.
So both those conditions. I've got an amendment moved by Councillor Metzger. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
So Councillor Martin, around the table discussion. Please feel free to ask questions. We've got Mrs. Phoebe in the room. We can hopefully provide some feedback or answers. Questions, councillors?
Yeah, I do. Is the 6 hours an ad hoc number that you just come up with, or is that's going to be restrictive to trade of those people in the vans?
6 hours is a long time spent in the van. It's also Hobart City Council has 4 hours, and then they're allowed to be there for 6 hours to set up and shut down, basically, but they're allowed to trade for 4 hours. So I think 6 hours is adequate. That sort of 9 till 3 or 6 till, or it can't be past midnight, 4 till 10. I think that's adequate.
Sure.
So we've got a mover and a second. Any more questions? I'll put the amendment and see how we go. All those in favour? Okay, and against? The vote is if I'm not mistaken, 6-2. So the vote, the amendment is carried. It now becomes the motion.
I just didn't tell you voted.
Sorry, sorry, I should be clear. My apologies.
Sorry.
Those voting against Councillor Fiddler and Deputy Mayor Mead.
And
Oh, apologies again, then I miscounted.
You did.
The vote is then,
Didn't realise Dave put it in.
apologies, councillors, it's 5-3, and the 3 voting against the Councillor Brown, Councillor Fiddler and Deputy Mayor Mead. The amendment is still carried and becomes the motion. If we need further debate on the motion, if not, I'll put the motion on. All those in favour? Those against? And again, the same vote, 5-3, with the same councillors voting against. That motion is carried. Again, may I just comment, having done that piece of work, completed that piece of work, the policy is open to be reviewed should the need arise and the feedback be provided for us to reflect on changes that the feedback requires. So nothing's locked in stone, or set in stone, I should say, but we have that opportunity. So again, feedback will be essential to that.
Could I just add something? Nothing to do with the debate or anything.
Let's take it, but maybe take a comment.
Just to reiterate to people with shop fronts that there was a bit of an impression amongst the community that we were all of a sudden allowing or encouraging food bans in these areas. They've always been allowed. We now just have a policy around it.
That's correct.
So that's not changing as far as, it's just people were under the impression that they weren't allowed before and now they will be. But
yeah. So any press we do on that or any social media or whatever should reflect on the our formal policy rather than a change in terms of allowing food bans. Okay, thanks to Councillor Metzger and thanks to the team for the work they've done. We did workshop that to some extent. Again, the feedback is appropriate. Next item on our agenda is 13.2, which is the community development grants for 2023-24, round 2. The report author, I should say, is Michelle Dutton, the team leader of community and economic development. There's a recommendation there with a report attached. But the report by the team leader community of economic development concerning community development grants 2023-24, round 2, be received, and the council approves the following grants amounting to $5,599, excluding GST, from round 2 of its 2023-24 community grants budget. The proposed allocations are listed for councillors. There are 4 of those. One, Westvale Football Club, Latrobe Croquet Club, Latrobe Cricket Club, the Ports Royal Surf Life Saving Club. Do we have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Sims and Councillor Fiddler. Thank you. Councillor Sims.
Conducted as council committee of community grants. Like I said, there were 4 recipients there that received it under the terms of reference and guidelines. So, and it's just noted too, I want to note too that those recipients, they make a contribution themselves towards it that's under the terms. So, all good.
Nice. Thank you for that. Nice to be able to support those community groups and organisations. Councillor Fiddler.
Nothing further. Councillor Sims has already said everything.
No problem. Anyone else wish to make a comment or question or query? Councillor Martin.
It was good to see those people putting their hands up for support. However, it would be good to see others, the ones that have received the support have received support many times. So it would be good to get the word out there more broadly to other organisations to have a crack.
Lodge an application.
Yep.
I agree. Yeah, that's true. Again, some publicising of that opportunity. I do it on radio and the mayor's message to whatever extent I can, but yes, it's often falls on deaf ears apparently. Point taken. Thank you for that. If there's no other discussion, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. 13.3 is the Banksia Facilities Committee, a council proxy, report by the team leader of community and economic development, with a recommendation that the report by the team leader be received and that the council appoint a councillor, yet to be determined, as proxy councillor, representative to the Banksia Facilities Committee. So I'd like to just ask if I could move Councillor Sims and seconded Councillor Metzger. Councillor Sims is chair of that committee. Sure you've got a comment?
Yeah, it's one of the council committees that hasn't had a proxy on the committee. So if I'm not mistaken, I recommend Councillor Metzger if she says yes.
Meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning.
I know, that's why I got on the agenda today.
Has there been a coup that I'm not aware of? So, Councillor Sims, you're moving a motion
Recommend council.
with Councillor Metzger's name included to act as a proxy on that committee representing council. So is the seconder happy with that?
Yes, the seconder is happy.
It may be better if someone else.
I will look for an alternative seconder, given the implications. So, Councillor Brown, thank you. As the seconder, if you don't mind amending that, Sarah, is there any need for further discussion on nominations? No, all good. We appreciate you putting your hand up, Councillor Metzger. Put it to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. And those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. Likewise, we to consider at 13.4 the appointment of a proxy to the Elderly Persons Advisory Committee. Again, the report's been done, the recommendation's been made. In this case, yes, I'm a little lost there.
Along with the recommendation.
So I'll read the recommendation, but the report by the team leader concerning proxy appointment to Elderly Persons Unit Advisory Committee be received, and Council endorse the appointment of Mr Ian Broomhall as proxy representative of the New Street Unit Complex on the Council's Elderly Persons Unit Advisory Committee through to the 30th of June 2026. Quite a clear recommendation. We have a mover and a seconder, please. I think I have moving Councillor Sims and seconded Councillor Wicks. Any discussion required?
No.
Happy? Around the room? All good? If that's the case, we'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Motion is carried, and we thank Ian for being prepared to act as a proxy, continue his long-standing contribution to our community. 13.5 is the finance report. Report author is our team leader of finance. The recommendation is that the finance report, the period ending September 2023, as provided by the team leader, finance be received. That's the entirety of the recommendation. Can we have a mover and a seconder, please? We have Deputy Mayor Mead as the mover, and seconder is Councillor Wicks. Thank you, and I'll hand over to Deputy Mayor Mead as the mover.
Thank you for the finance report. I just will make a comment around the capital expenditure year to date. Obviously, we've got a lot to get through in this financial year, and it's always slow for that first quarter. So there's a lot of work to happen over the summer period and the back end of next year.
Thank you. Seconder, have anything to add? Councillor Wicks, thank you.
A comment that's hopefully very easy. The point there in the report, rate collections, as of 30th September 2023, there's $4 million of rates outstanding compared to 3.642 million outstanding at the same time last year. Majority of that, I'd imagine, is for new rates or new builds and the like, I'd imagine. Is that right?
So we've deferred to the acting manager of corporate and business, Mrs. Phoebe.
Yeah, I can respond to that. Even though the rates outstanding this year are higher than last year, it's reflective of the amount that was levied. So it's basically 38% this year, 38% for September last year. So it's coming from a higher amount levied. Okay. What you may recall, it was lagging behind last month, but that was due to the timing of the rates notices being sent out last year.
So the percentage is similar and the dollar amount has increased given the increase in rates. Okay, thank you for that. Any other queries or questions in relation to that report? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. As against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Our next item is, if I'm not mistaken, Sarah, 16.1, which is council workshops. Again, recommendation is that the information on topics discussed at the 25th of September council workshop be received. Mover and seconder, please, councillors. Councillor Fiddler, thank you. And Councillor Mead, thank you. Councillor Fiddler.
Nothing for that.
Councillor Mead. Councillors, there for the record, I put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. Likewise, we have 16.2, the delegates report, information provided for councillors. Recommendation is that the delegates' reports be received and noted. Before I ask for a move in a second, I will pass on my thanks to Deputy Mayor Mead for filling in as acting mayor during my absence. Very much appreciated. So you've been relatively busy. And I'll look for a mover and seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Wicks, thank you, and Councillor Metzger.
It's like enough.
Yeah, I was going to say you can tell he's been on leave because the spreadsheet there is quite a lot smaller than it normally is. So I'd imagine you appreciated that leave very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Metzger.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Around the table, questions or queries in relation to those two reports? No, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Now we go to 16.3, where the council decision status report is provided for your information, and a recommendation that the report be received. Mover and seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Mead, thank you, and Councillor Wicks. Deputy Mayor Mead.
Thank you for the report. I did want to highlight the Latrobe CBD master plan, which is item 1.23. It does talk about having community discussions in the hall on the 16th and 17th of November. So I wasn't aware of that until I read it, and we want to make sure everyone participates in that.
It was going to be in October, and then the hall was booked. Mrs. Phoebe, is that right?
That's we're just working through with the consultant at the moment on the communication plan. So that's just been finalised. There will also be an opportunity, a drop-in day down at Station Square. They also intend while they're over, because it's the Thursday and Friday, they'll stay over and go to the market on Saturday and sort of canvass people there. There will also be an opportunity for councillors for a session, them to have input as well.
General Manager.
I could add, Mr. Mayor, too, we're also meeting with different groups. I did meet with the people from the market 2 or 3 Sundays ago, where they saw an article in the newsletter about looking at the market in the CBD, so they wanted to know what that. So we encourage them to be part of it. And now the consultants are going to meet with them, and you'll see in the mayor's activities that the mayor and I did meet with the community shed representatives, and we encourage them also to participate in those discussions. So yeah, so we are getting the message out, encouraging people to really participate in the meetings, discussions.
It will be crucial that we advertise that very, very broadly, utilising, if we can, our digital sign, if the team think that's appropriate, certainly effective in other meetings and the like, and other opportunities. So yeah, really looking forward to some great feedback and widespread feedback on where we go with our CBD in particular, and the area defined by that report scope. Anything further, Councillor Mead?
Yes, just to note on item 17.1, the Bells Parade or the Axman's Hall of Fame, it comments that the ramp's now been installed after the incident in that area. So that's good to have that moving as well.
Thank you for highlighting that. Any other comments? Councillor Metzger? No. Councillors around the table? Councillor Martin?
Is this the report where it should identify the intersection at Portsmouth Main Road and Westbar Road?
As in the status of those projects?
The status of the signage that's supposed to go in.
I might just check with Mr. Magor. Should those 2 projects be included in the status report, or will we wait to commence?
Certainly the upgrade to the existing signage has been approved by the Department of State Growth and has been issued to our Works Department to implement that. But in terms of what happened with that overall junction into the future, that's still out at the moment. So that's probably the more strategic project of the 2.
Can we get it listed somewhere so that it's visible?
as in the update.
Look, yeah, so it's just a question that, continually asked. And I just get concerned that sometimes when in a busy environment, things can get missed.
Yeah. I think this is more of a concern around capital more generally. And we don't necessarily report on the status to the extent some people would expect and like us to. I might ask the General Manager, in terms of our status reporting, is there a scope or opportunity to report more specifically around the projects, Councillor?
I guess we could have a section. Yeah, this is generally only, it was brought in probably a decade ago just to track decisions of council. That must have been went through a workshop or something else, but I guess we could start a page where we have items that don't formally come through the council.
In fact, without wanting to preempt anything, I think it's probably appropriate we discuss the item in workshop and see what information councils actually do want and seem to prioritise outside what's already provided. So there might be a broader reporting mechanism on a broader range of subjects that we currently don't provide reports on. So if you're okay that we discuss it at a workshop, and the General Manager or Sarah, if you would make a point of that as a workshop item. Jono, I'd like to add something as well.
In that discussion, there might be opportunity, there might be in this specific project that there is an item that goes to council and that the recommendation of that item is to lobby the state government or whatever it might be, given that Portsrail Road is there. So this project might end up in our normal scenario in any case.
As well, yeah. But we have made that decision and we're waiting on the outcome, albeit only on advocacy that we've provided.
Yeah, so potentially we could go to council to get it onto this through our current process rather than...
Understand. And hopefully Sarah's made that note and the GM can follow up. But we need to have a broader discussion, I think, around that issue on reporting to councillors and to the public by our meeting. So thank you for that. Any other further queries or questions in relation to our status report? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is carried. Next, we have 16.4, which is the Portsrail Community Information Evening. Recommendation that the notes of the Portsrail Community Information Evening held on the 21st September be received. Thank you, Councillor Wicks. Seconded, Councillor Deputy Mayor Mead, I should say. Thank you. Councillor Wicks.
Oh, just some basic comments, I guess. Attendance there wasn't as large a crowd as what we normally get out there, which I guess the cold night put it off because it was absolutely freezing in the Banksia Centre that night. If you didn't have a puffer jacket, you would never have one. But no, it was good for the public to see what's going on and a bit of conversation about the rejuvenation or the reinstallation of the Portsrail roundabout and the alignment as to the benefits. So, interesting.
Thank you, Councillor Wicks. Deputy Mayor Mead.
No, thank you for the notes and disappointed that I couldn't be there. But I did hear that perhaps we need to think about the location and the heating for future meetings when it's not in the middle of summer.
One of the real benefits was that we froze. So, and with all due respect to those people listening online and those people here in the room, that's something that councils now have seen firsthand and we'll need to consider in terms of how we heat and cool the new facility to some extent. So I'm sure that'll come up at the Banksia Centre meeting and be considered with recommendations to come back to council. I'd be surprised if that's not the case. And Councillor Sims has confirmed. So I expect that'll be on their agenda, but did highlight those concerns for sure. Great opportunity and reasonable attendance, but thank you for that. Any other further comments or questions, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? That motion is carried. Next on our agenda is the committees of council, and the first one off the first cab off the rank, is the Latrobe Elderly Persons Unit Advisory Committee, with a recommendation that the minutes be received and the following recommendation be endorsed. The recommendation is that carport fencing at 12 Hampton Street If council personnel are unable to complete the project within the budget, the Latrobe man shed may be a viable alternative to undertake the work at the standard required, and funding for this project be pursued as a mid-year budget allocation.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Sims. And a second, looking around the room, Councillor Martin, thank you. Councillor Sims.
There is a full coverage of the meeting there in your attachments. If there's any questions, go forward.
Recommendation is clear. Secondly, have anything to add? Queries or questions? I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
That motion is carried. Sorry, I should say those against. Motion is carried. Thank you. 17.2 is the Ports Royal Caravan Park Committee meeting held at 27th September. Recommendations are numerous by comparison to other meetings. There are not only that the minutes be received, but also 7 recommendations there. Do we have a mover and a seconder, please? And that would be Deputy Mayor Mead, thank you, and Councillor Metzger. Deputy Mayor Mead, do you wish to speak to the agenda item?
I think it's all there. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, starting with Councillor Metzger.
Many happy people to know that the playground is going back where it was. Removed, albeit smaller. Yeah, I don't know. People are very pro that location. The only concern I had around it, that's the only concern with the playground, is I've noticed that it's going to be basically for 0 to 5s because of the Banksia Centre. Different case for that little bit older age group. I suppose my thoughts are around the fact that the adjoining hall playground is actually kind of for that age group.
True.
So to me, that's what was great about that playground, is that you had the little place for littlies and then place for the bigger kids side by side. So I don't know that you would consider maybe doing something a little bit older.
Yeah.
Sorry, please.
Okay, I might just let Councillor Mead or Deputy Mayor Mead respond if she wants to. If not, we'll respond through the General Manager or myself.
Well, I probably missed some of that conversation since I left early, because it does talk about repurposing the equipment that was bought for that site. So I'll perhaps hand it to you so you can talk with regard to that.
Yes, so certainly the equipment that was bought for that site was bought, Gerald, some time ago.
2 years ago.
3 years. And personally, I don't have a huge understanding about what age group it's aimed at. But again, my understanding, it wasn't the zeros, but it was above. So I think we should provide councillors with, people were asking.
I presume it was a bit bigger because.
So did I. Adam wasn't able to provide that information to us on the night, but I think we should obviously we should chase that up.
Yeah.
Well, I'll ask Sarah to make a note to get Adam to forward an email to councillors just to reflect the age group that equipment does cater for. Given that we're locked into the provision of it, given it was purchased for that site quite some time ago.
My understanding, Mr. Mayor, it was for a bigger age group because he's come back to after the meeting to say he doesn't believe it needs to be fenced. So
So 2 line up, but we need confirmation.
He didn't believe, given the age groups, you probably wouldn't need to fence that section.
Yeah.
So as I say, clarity will be provided via an email to councillors via Adam, who's looking after that project for us. Anything else, councillors, in relation to those minutes?
Probably, Mr. Mayor, it's probably worth noting there the changes to the semi-permanents. Been an issue in the 17 years I've been here. We did make an attempt several years ago to, I guess, put in procedures, I guess, with different caretakers and different models of operating it. Fair to say it hasn't always been completely successful. I did meet a couple of months ago with the operators of the Bridport Caravan Park, and they'd done a lot of work looking at what occurred in other states. Consumer Affairs had procedures in other states, don't have them in Tasmania, so it was based on their processes. And so brought those recommendations back to the committee and they thought they were good. The only change they've made is that if someone endeavours to transfer it at Bridport, if they give 6 months notice, and if no one on the list wants them, well then at the end of the 6 month period, they need to relocate it anyway. The committee here thought we'd give them the option if they couldn't sell it to people, and we're having a waiting list. If it wasn't sold to people on the waiting list, well then they had the option to then stay there. That was the only difference to the situation at Bridport. I think it's probably useful to have similar guidelines in different caravan parks, but it is, the procedures are based on what's happening in other states. But it has been an issue here, and over the years at different stages, people have sold them on the open market, and some of that's created all sorts of angst because then people believe they bought freehold, and so and the idea of putting the waiting list there is to stop, people that are there are genuine, looking at charging $100 administration fee, which what they do at Bridport.
That item in particular was influenced by the input from our representative from the camp, Rod Patterson, and certainly I'd support that given my personal experience. But yeah, again, we're not locked into that being a long-term policy. We can review it on a needs basis. I'd also like to note that recommendation number 5, where we're now going to apply a $100 per annum fee to those wishing to be on that waiting list, so we can make sure there aren't just the tire kickers, and we can ensure that the work we undertake during the listing of sites for sale is compensated for in some way. Likewise, recommendation 6 is very clear. The current caretaker living model be continued. And again, that the procurement process for new caretakers start immediately, and that's critical that our council team, staff, are aware of that recommendation, because we do have a set time frame in which Trevor and Faye have determined that they will be leaving. Yeah, they have given that notice. So some really clear recommendations there for adoption or your support. I encourage your support for those. Any other queries or questions? Councillor Metzger.
Do you have how long people are on the waiting list for? Like, is it years and years before they get?
It can be because you can't determine when someone's going to want to sell their on-site van, and personal circumstances dictate that generally. So, no, it's.
I suppose because I'm all for a fee because, you don't want tire kickers, but maybe I don't know if each year per annum, if it's years and years, that could add up quite a bit.
True.
I think that's a conversation to have. I was on the fence whether or not to comment on that, but I would feel a lot more comfortable if someone's paid $100 to be on there, that if they purchase one, then it be rebated back out at the $600 fee perhaps. Otherwise we just grab.
What if we...
if I can just talk to that.
Please, Deputy Mayor Mead.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if someone's on there for a period of time.
Deputy Mayor Mead.
I understand what you're saying, but a lot of the analysis has come from staff based on workload. So there has been and there is a lot of work that's involved in keeping the list up to date, making sure people that are there that truly want to be there. And then, of course, we've got the other fee, which is associated with the bidding process and the contractual side of things. So it has been a difficult process over the years with regard to some semi-permanent licence holders not understanding that it's an annual licence, that they could be asked to leave the site at any time after that 12-month period, and also try not to overcapitalise as well, because that becomes a challenge when it comes to sale. So it is trying to sort of set the scene and get people to understand, one, there's a lot of work involved in the processing of these things, and we just, as council, we keep absorbing a lot of costs, whereas this actually is, to a degree, a commercial operation that we need to consider how we manage that into the future. So that they are just things we've had to consider and deal with around how we effectively manage the park into the future.
Yeah. I suppose that's why I asked how long, if you're 10 years as well, so
again,
adds up.
Understand the intent of the question.
I'm not sure, but I guess one of the benefits of being on the list is, they had a case when I was talking to Bridport. They had someone that wanted it. The lady thought, the caretakers thought they were probably wanting too much. So they go to the first 10 and then they open it up to the rest of the people on the list. So in that case, someone that was number 76 on the list agreed to pay that amount. So it's not necessarily waiting years. I mean, it's still a bit of what they had to pay too.
Yeah.
So being on the list, it does give you the advantage that if one comes up, you have the option to.
True.
As always, these policies are subject to review, and it'll be interesting if we do get feedback from those people on the list with concerns relating to that particular recommendation.
Can we get a number on the list?
I think it'd be really healthy for us to have that
and
some answers to Councillor Metzger's questions too. Just, how long people have been on there, how often do they sell, how many per year do we have go on the list and that sort of thing. Yeah, it'd be really good feedback, not only for council, but specifically for the committee as such. That'd be great. Thank you for that.
So really the number on the list.
Yeah, and I've got a couple of notes about the analysis that Councillor Metzger referred to. Okay, having said all that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Getting towards the end. The final one, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is 17.3, which is the Bells Parade Precinct Committee meeting. The recommendation that the minutes be received. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Brown, I thought that might be the case, and Councillor Wicks. Councillor Brown, comment?
The minutes are there for everybody to read, and if they want to know anything, they can ask questions.
As always, Councillor Wicks.
It was a good meeting, actually. Joan Wiley attended the meeting with some, what we call them, Gerald, some proofs, I guess.
Sketches, concepts.
Some concept design of the interpretive signage for the Bells Parade precinct. And we went with a particular colour, which we all agreed would look really good and really pops with the information that's put on them. So if we need a bit more money for the completion of them, etc. There were some service clubs that were going to be asked, etc. If they were interested further, and if they can't assist, well, I probably imagine we'll probably push on for a few more dollars just to see if we can complete
mid-year budget project.
But if you've seen those sketches and those concept designs, then I think they're really good, and that lists the history of the Bells Parade area quite well.
Thank you for that. Queries, questions, councillors? Deputy Mayor Mead.
Excellent minutes, and it's really exciting, all that's happening down there. But we should make note of the hidden treasures that have been found in the sealed space. Rather exciting.
Yeah, so they'll be used as part of the interpretation. Yeah. No, it's an interesting story.
Okay. Having said that, put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. Final item on our agenda that council deal with the listed items in a closed meeting. So the council reverts to closed session. Move Councillor Wicks as is usual, and Councillor Fiddler, thank you. All those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. We'll now go into closed session. Take a couple of minutes if you need it, and we'll come back and deal with our closed items. Thank you, everybody. And I'll ask Sarah, before we get too carried away, to close off that streaming. Sarah, if you can let us know when